Max Payne is one of those games that just stuck with me. A game that really stood out at the time. It was dark, edgy and gritty, kind of a modern Gothic noir. But what would I think of this game over 20 years since I first played it? Was this nostalgia? Or was there something more? To my surprise, it was not nostalgia. Max's creepy frozen expression and the dated graphics are easily forgotten once you start to immerse yourself into the brilliant story and interesting level design. This is why Remedy shines. They know how to tell a story. They mess with your mind and are masters of integrating new ideas into games.
Her time is now, and all who stand in her way must die!
The narrated comic book style frames that take place where most games would use cinematics is something I find particularly appealing and memorable. In typical Remedy fashion, you can hear a lot of the protagonist's inner dialogue as you play through the game.
Then Incognito was running scared. He could run, but with a bullet in the stomach like a broken bottle.
This is something I absolutely love about all their games. The narration of the protagonist's thoughts just adds an extra layer of depth to the story.
He knew where his boss was, and I wanted to square things up with Jack Lupino. Incognito would be moving fast. I don't know about angels, but it's fear that gives men wings.
As far as I know, Max Payne was the first game to introduce the bullet time style of gameplay that we take for granted in so many games now. This was groundbreaking then, and for its time, it really stood out on almost every level. To my surprise, it still feels amazing in 2023. The game starts. Max is working for the DEA, and we find ourselves in the moments that lead up to the end of the game.
All units, emergency. Officer in danger. Acer Plaza. Repeat. Acer Plaza. All units.
They were all dead. The final gunshot was an exclamation mark to everything that had led to this point. I released my finger from the trigger, and then it was over.
But to get here, we have to start at the beginning of the story. We have to go back 3 years to when Max was working for the New York Police Department. Returning home from work one night, Max finds his wife and child murdered by drug-enraged home invaders high on a designer drug named Valkyr, also called V. Or at least that's what we're supposed to believe at this point. This part of the game is what I would call a prelude. After the funeral, Max transfers to the Drug Enforcement Agency to hunt down the source of V. Almost 3 years have passed with no leads. Chapter 1 starts just 2 months before the screen that the game opens with. The last scene in the game. With new intel, the hunt for mob boss Jack Lupino begins. The game takes many dark turns and twists, as Max descends deeper into the dark and creepy underbelly of New York. The story quickly starts to show it's not as simple as we thought. As we go deeper into the world of drugs, Max ends up getting framed for murder, being pursued by multiple enemies, never sure who to trust or who is telling the truth. As you progress through the chapters, the fights get harder, and this leads to Max popping pain pill after pain pill. And mechanically, this is needed as a function to return his lost health. But from the storytelling point, it also establishes his addiction and dependency on these painkillers, as a means of not just dealing with his physical pain, but his psychological trauma as well.
Max?
Under their influence, the truth can be hard to see.
Max? You're in a computer game, Max.
At the end of Chapter 1, we realize it goes much deeper than Lupino. We soon meet Mona Sachs, the Femme Fatale assassin, who is hunting mafia boss Angelo Punchinello. She's trying to free her sister Lisa from him. Mona's intentions are not entirely clear at this point, but she wants Max out of the way as she fears his pursuit might endanger Mona's sister. Between chapters, we find ourselves in a drug-fueled nightmare, thanks to Mona putting something in our drink. In this nightmare, we have to relive the death of our family. Lost in an endless maze of hallways, we have to follow the sound of our crying child, which leads to a maze in the dark with only trails of blood to follow. We finally make our way out. We see ourselves as the murderer, questioning our own sanity.
Murderer! You killed her!
Max's investigation leads him to the Hesir Corporation, a powerful pharmaceutical company that is believed to be behind the creation of Valkyr. Max infiltrates their headquarters and discovers that the company is involved in a conspiracy with the mob to distribute V. As the bodies pile high and the darkness closes in, Max must use all of his skills and cunning to survive, but even the most hardened soul can break under the weight of such grief and loss. Turning on in-game TV sets is optional, but if you do, they will give you information in the form of a TV series called Address Unknown. How you choose to interpret that info is up to you. Strangely, there are a lot of events in different episodes of this show that mirror the storyline yourself are experiencing. You will also see the first appearance of the flamingo, a symbol that seems to represent sanity and insanity, which is an interesting choice, as in our culture it represents balance, potential, and romance, which in a way are all things Max is fighting for in his life. Max Payne explores the dark side of human nature and the fragility of the human mind. It is a story of loss, revenge, and redemption. Max is a complex and sympathetic protagonist, and his journey is one that will stay with players long after they have finished the game.
They were all dead. The final gunshot was an exclamation mark to everything that had led to this point. I released my finger from the trigger,